Thank you for joining us around the fire. Now, want to hear a scary story?
She pushed open the creaking, cast iron gate in the fence that surrounded the house. It banged shut behind her as she walked up to the front door. Thick clumps of lilacs hung over the doorway. The air was laden with their suffocating, sweet odor. Rosalind lifted the heavy brass knocker and then let it fall. A hollow thump echoed inside the house. A few seconds later, the door opened. "Rosalind, it is you, isn't it? You're so grown up I hardly recognize you." Then she was smothered in the lilac-perfumed embrace of her aunt. "Hello, Aunt Harriet. Come inside, dear, out of this humidity. The house always stays cool inside." Rosalind followed into a large, dark hallway that was as cool as an underground cave. "Here you are, finally visiting me after 16 years. How was your train ride?" But Aunt Harriet didn't wait for an answer. She chattered on. "I've been after your father to let you come for years. Well, it isn't any secret that your father didn't like my husband, is it? But now that dear Arthur has been dead for 4 years..." Aunt Harriet paused and then sighed. "It has been 4 long years since Arthur killed himself." Rosalind stared down at her feet. She didn't know what to say. Her mother had warned her that Aunt Harriet might be a little strange, and she was right. "This is an enormous house, Aunt Harriet," Rosalind finally said. "I'll take you on a tour once you've had time to unpack. Now you must want to see your bedroom."
"See your bedroom,"
a strange voice croaked out. "Who was that?" Rosalind asked uneasily. Aunt Harriet laughed with her high, tittering laugh and walked over to the end of the hallway. She pulled off a green velvet cover, revealing a large parrot in a cage. "That was Polly, wasn't it, Polly?" Aunt Harriet made bird noises to the parrot. Rosalind did not approach the bird cage. She hated parrots. "Aunt Harriet, I think I'll go to my room now. If you could show me where it is?" "Of course, Rosalind. I'll be right back, Polly." Aunt Harriet led the way up a curved flight of stairs leading to the second floor. "First, I want to show you your Uncle Arthur's study and laboratory. Arthur was a great scientist, you know. He was just ahead of his time. The people at the university were jealous of his superiority. Really, that was the only reason he had to leave and carry on his experiments here at home." They had walked into a huge book-lined room. Rosalind looked around it in awe. So this was where Uncle Arthur worked. She had always known he was a scientist, but her father refused to talk about his work. She knew there had been some sort of scandal, and Uncle Arthur had been dismissed from his university post. "And through this door," Aunt Harriet said as she walked on, "is his laboratory." The next room was even more awesome. It was filled with labeled jars of chemicals, test tubes, and other scientific equipment. "What exactly did Uncle Arthur study?" Rosalind asked. "He was a biologist, a great biologist," Aunt Harriet said in a reverent tone. "He studied human mutations." "Oh," Rosalind said. She looked around the walls. There were pictures of apes and monkeys hanging beside photographs of human bodies. "You understand, don't you, Rosalind, that you mustn't touch anything in these 2 rooms. They are a monument to my husband's greatness. Someday science will come to understand his genius. These rooms must be preserved exactly as they are. "Yes, Aunt Harriet," Rosalind said as she followed her aunt back through the study and into the hallway again. "The rest of the house you can explore on your own, Rosalind," Aunt Harriet said. "But I want to make one thing very clear to you." Aunt Harriet's voice hardened. "I never want you to go up into the attic. Do you understand that?"
Understand that?
The parrot mimicked from the next room. "I'm very serious, Rosalind. Never open the door that leads to the attic, or you'll be sorry."
You'll be sorry.
Polly croaked. Rosalind felt a strange sensation come over her. "I understand, Aunt Harriet," she promised. Aunt Harriet walked down to the room at the end of the hall. "Here is your room, Rosalind. I hope you like it. It used to be my sitting room when I first married." Rosalind peeked inside. The entire room was done in lilac. The bedspread was bright lilac. The wallpaper was a design of pale lilac flowers on white. And even the furniture was painted the shade of lilac. "Oh, Aunt Harriet." That was all Rosalind could think of to say. "You get yourself settled in, Rosalind, dear. Then come down and we'll have some tea together." 20 minutes later, Rosalind came down the curving staircase to join her aunt for tea. Aunt Harriet was waiting in a sunlit room off the main hallway. Tea and cake were already sitting out on a small table by the sofa. "Have some delicious cake, Rosalind. It's so nice to have company. Polly and I have to eat alone usually, don't we, Polly?"
Alone,
croaked Polly. The parrot's cage had been set by the window. Rosalind ate some of the cake and sipped some of the tea. Her eyes slowly surveyed the room. The furnishings were very old-fashioned. The lamps had crystal beads hanging from the shades. Old velvet cloths, edged with fringe, were thrown over the chairs. Little statues and knickknacks and pictures were everywhere. One picture, in particular, caught Rosalind's eyes. "Is that my cousin Herman?" she asked. Aunt Harriet made a choking sound in her throat. "I'm sorry, Aunt Harriet. That was rude of me." Rosalind blushed. She knew that Aunt Harriet must feel awful about losing her son Herman when he was so young. And Uncle Arthur had killed himself just a month later. Rosalind tried to make up for upsetting her aunt. "You know, Aunt Harriet, I always wished I had known Herman. We were born the same year. I cried so hard when I heard that he had died, even though we never met." Aunt Harriet had regained her composure. "Yes, dear. That is a picture of Herman. Now, let's not talk about the past." Rosalind spent the next days wandering about the house, leafing through the old books she found and sitting out in the garden at night with her aunt. Aunt Harriet asked a lot of questions about Rosalind's father and mother, but she changed the subject whenever Rosalind asked more about her cousin Herman. The time passed pleasantly enough for Rosalind, but after a few days she became restless. There was no one else to talk to but Aunt Harriet. Rosalind was ready for something to break the tedium. The fourth day she was there, Aunt Harriet announced that she was going to a friend's house for afternoon tea. Rosalind could come along if she wanted. Rosalind thought it over and decided she would probably be bored. She told her aunt she would stay home by herself and perhaps go into the garden and read. When her aunt left, Rosalind went up to her room and tried to read a novel she had brought along. But the novel didn't interest her. After a few minutes, she slammed the book shut. She got up and went out into the hallway. There was nothing she could think of to do. Her vacation had turned out to be quite the disappointment. As she walked down the hallway, she passed the door that she knew led up to the attic. She paused in front of it. Aunt Harriet had acted very strangely about her going into the attic. Rosalind wondered what could be up there. Probably a lot of old clothes that Aunt Harriet didn't want her to get into. Or maybe there were other family photographs that her aunt didn't want to have to talk about. Rosalind put her hand on the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned. But then she shook her hand away. Aunt Harriet had warned her, almost threatened her, not to go up there. She started to walk away, but her curiosity about the attic made her stop. Aunt Harriet was a little crazy. There was probably no reason in the world why she shouldn't go up there. Making up her mind, Rosalind put her hand on the doorknob again and turned it. As she pushed the door open, it stuck for a moment, but then swung open. A short flight of stairs led up to the attic. Rosalind walked up them slowly. As her eyes reached the level of the attic floor, she saw something that brought her to a dead halt. She stared at the thing, the half-human, half-animal thing, staring back at her. Then she let out an awful scream and scrambled back down the attic stairs. Rosalind felt sick. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. It didn't make any sense. It was some monstrous, living thing such as she had never seen before. She pushed open the attic door and ran to the stairway. Then she heard what she had feared. Steps were coming down the attic stairs behind her, the steps of that thing. For a moment, Rosalind's knees gave out. She tried to run away as she saw the thing come onto the hall landing, but she couldn't. The awful creature came nearer. It reached out a fur-covered arm, and Rosalind ran. She ran down the steps, nearly falling. The thing came after her. She could hear it making short, snorting sounds as it breathed. Rosalind ran into the living room. Then she realized in a second that there was no way out of the room. She dashed for the door again, just barely missing the thing's outstretched arm. She ran down the hallway to the kitchen. The thing lumbered after her. She tried to get its face out of her mind. It was the face, the strangely human face, that bothered her most. She ran through the kitchen to the back door to the garden. Too late, she realized that the garden also was a dead end. Rosalind pressed her back up against the stone garden wall. The thing came out of the back door and shuffled toward her. She saw its ugly face spread wide in a smile. She screamed and darted to one side. Again, she just escaped its outstretched arm. But now it was close behind her. Rosalind ran through the kitchen and into the hallway, but she didn't make it to the front door. She stumbled and fell. The thing came and stood over Rosalind. It reached its furry arm down to her and tapped her on the head.
Tag, you're it.
The parrot croaked from its cage. Rosalind fainted. When she came to, the thing's face was still hovering over her, but beside it was Aunt Harriet's face. Rosalind, you naughty girl. What did I tell you about going into the attic? I said you would be sorry. Aunt Harriet was shaking her finger at Rosalind. You've got poor Herman all nervous now.
Poor Herman,
the parrot repeated. Yes, poor Herman, Aunt Harriet said, stroking her son's head. He has never been the same since Arthur's last experiment. Then, Aunt Harriet looked down at Rosalind again. You do realize, Rosalind, that we can't let you go now. Not now that you know our secret. I'll have to call your parents and tell them that you never arrived here. And we can arrange a nice room for her in the attic. Can't we, Herman? Rosalind looked up into her mad aunt's face. Then she looked at her cousin. An eager grin was spread across Herman's ugly face. "You'll be very happy here with us, Rosalind," Aunt Harriet said.
Very happy.
The parrot croaked. Rosalind screamed, and then she fainted away again. Herman picked up her limp body and started carrying it up the staircase to the attic door. Mr. Peebles pushed aside the curtain of glass beads that hung over the entrance to the fortune teller's chamber. He walked inside. Behind him, the beads swung back together with a clatter. Mr. Peebles was alone in the chamber. He sat down on a chair and surveyed the room. Red and black silk curtains hung all around the walls, alternating in color. The floor was covered with brightly designed Persian carpets. Mr. Peebles looked up. Painted on the black ceiling were symbols and pictures which he had never seen before. An eerie blue light shone throughout the room. Mr. Peebles put his hands on his knees and waited. His wife had told him that he would have to wait. It was his wife, in fact, who had persuaded Mr. Peebles to come to the fortune teller. He himself was far too reasonable a man to be interested in hocus-pocus like this, but his wife was a persuasive woman. The swishing sounds of silk against silk made Mr. Peebles look up. The fortune teller had entered the chamber. She was a large woman with long black hair. Her costume was flamboyant. The red full dress was adorned with necklaces, bangles, and a silver belt which had a clasp designed of two intertwined snakes' heads. "You are Mr. Peebles." The fortune teller announced this as a fact, not a question. Yes, I am," Mr. Peebles stammered, suddenly flustered by the presence of this overwhelming woman. "Take my hand and come to the table." The woman reached a heavily bangled arm out at Mr. Peebles. He drew his arm out to her and she clutched his hand tightly, almost fiercely. She led him over to one corner of the room where a round table sat. 2 chairs were arranged around it, opposite from each other. "Sit down, Mr. Peebles, and we shall begin." Mr. Peebles stumbled into the chair to which the fortune teller pointed and sat down. His eyes were riveted on the crystal ball which sat in the dead center of the round table. He looked at it with a mixture of amusement and fear. The chamber was much as he had expected. It contained all the typical furnishings and paraphernalia of the fortune teller. And yet, he was uneasy here. His common sense was disturbed by the presence of this woman, who already exerted a magnetic influence over him. "Look into my eyes, Mr. Peebles." The fortune teller's voice was strong and suggestive. Mr. Peebles obeyed. "You have suffered a great misfortune, haven't you, Mr. Peebles?" she said, staring deep into his eyes. "Yes, that's right," Mr. Peebles began. "You lost the job you had for 20 years. Is that right, Mr. Peebles?" Now it seemed that the fortune teller could see behind his eyes, into his brain. "How did you know?" he asked dreamily. "I know," the fortune teller replied, "and I know more. You fear death, don't you, Mr. Peebles? You feel the hand of death tightening around your neck." At that moment, Mr. Peebles' neck did seem to be choked by an invisible hand. he began to pour out what had been haunting him these past months. Yes, I fear death, yes. I feel that life has passed me by, and all that is left for me is death. Poor Mr. Peebles, the fortune-teller's voice went on soothingly. Let me consult the crystal ball. The fortune-teller led Mr. Peebles' gaze from her eyes down to the crystal ball. It radiated an intense blue light, the eerie blue glow that Mr. Peebles had noticed in the room earlier. The fortune-teller began to drone a rhythmic chant as she stared into the crystal ball. Then, suddenly, she sucked in her breath. Mr. Peebles shifted his eyes from the crystal ball to her face. Her eyes were burning, and the black brows were knit together. I see doom before you, Mr. Peebles. What this crystal ball has told me is not pleasant. It gives a black picture of your family. Death. Her words were drowned out by Mr. Peebles' shriek of despair. His fears had been right. Death was stalking him. He felt the fortune-teller's fingers entwine in his. Mr. Peebles, Mr. Peebles, we all must die. You must simply accept it and provide for your loved ones. Mr. Peebles came out of his reverie. Loved ones, yes, he must provide for his beloved wife, Margaret. His darling Margaret. Mr. Peebles left the fortune-teller's chamber in a daze. He stumbled from the dark room, penetrated by the eerie blue light, out into the darker blackness of the winter night. As he drove his car home, he made himself a promise. No matter what came to him and how soon, he would take care of Margaret. Margaret was standing in the hallway, waiting for him when he arrived home. To a stranger, they may have appeared to be father and daughter. She was, in fact, 20 years younger than her husband. Margaret, it's awful. She said just what I feared. Mr. Peebles poured out his experience with the fortune-teller to his wife. She listened to his story, stroking his balding head with her soft hands. Margaret, I promise you will be cared for. Do not worry. I plan to take out a $100,000 life insurance policy. Whatever you want, dear, but stop this horrible talk of death. I won't hear it anymore. You laughed when I first suggested that you go to a fortune-teller, and now you take her silly predictions so seriously. Mr. Peebles felt better after that. He and his wife went to bed. The first thing Mr. Peebles did the next morning was visit his insurance broker. Despite the broker's advice to the contrary, he insisted that he take out a new insurance policy immediately. The beneficiary would be, of course, his wife. Mr. Peebles felt much better as he drove home from the insurance office, despite the meaning of what he had just done. He fell into a daydream about Margaret, how she could always keep the house and live as she did now. There was a sudden screeching sound, and Mr. Peebles' foot trembled on the brake pedal. The train engine flashed before him, followed by a constant whiz of boxcars. Their rumbling wheels on the track kept time with Mr. Peebles' pounding heart. The fortune-teller had been right about death. He had just barely escaped it. When he got home, Mr. Peebles told his wife about the train. She lay down on the couch and sobbed. To comfort her, he brought out the insurance policy. He kept repeating to her how he had made sure that she would always be protected. That afternoon, Mr. Peebles went out into the garage where he did small projects with wood to keep himself busy. Now he needed to get his mind off the morning incident with the train. He cleaned off the work table area, putting tools back in their proper drawers. There seemed to be a knife he had misplaced. He rummaged through more drawers. Then he reached up to a cabinet high above the table. As he pulled the door open, the missing knife fell from the cabinet ledge. Its sharp blade plunged down an inch away from his terrified eyes. The knife dug into the wooden workbench and vibrated from the force of its impact. Mr. Peebles backed away in horror. There was a death jinx on him. Mr. Peebles spent the rest of the afternoon lying on the couch in his study. He was paralyzed with fear. Death's bony hand seemed to be tightening its grip around his neck. He refused the dinner his wife brought him. He refused even to talk with her. Finally, in the late evening, he felt that he must get out of the house. He decided to take a walk along a deserted road near the house. He would be safe there. No traffic was allowed on that path. "Margaret," he called out to his wife, "I think I'll take a long walk on Old Mill Road. I'll be a while. Please don't wait up." Margaret came into the room and watched her husband dress for his walk. "You'll be careful, won't you? Remember what the fortune teller said." "Yes, I'll be careful, Margaret." Mr. Peebles kissed his wife's lips. "I'll see you later," he said as he went out the door. Margaret waited until she heard the door shut. Then, with a smile on her face, she walked over to the telephone. Along the path that was once the Old Mill Road, Mr. Peebles shuffled his feet through the dead autumn leaves. He let memories of his life drift in and out of his mind. It seemed so peaceful here on the path. Mr. Peebles began to think that the fortune teller could be wrong. Then, he was blinded by two headlights. Speeding toward him, straight down the middle of the path, was a huge car. He knew immediately that this was the end. Death had him in a stranglehold at last. Mr. Peebles stared at death as it bore down on him. In the seconds before he died, he saw the face that death wore. It was the face of the fortune teller behind the wheel of the car, and on the dashboard in front of her was the crystal ball.